Hi, today I'm talking with J. Allen Morris. We talked about never being able to read all the books in the world, and we also talked about our conscience of our privilege. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello everyone, and hello, Jay Allen. I think that's the way to pronounce this. Is this correct?
Yes, that's correct. But I'm also happy to be called Jay. Shorter, more memorable.
Well, I'm pretty sure that with already the pre-conversation we had, that memorable won't be a problem for today. I think that might be very nice. I want to show a little bit on for the people where we are, and I am in Ghent in Belgium, and you're in Berlin, if I'm not mistaken. So that's not that far away. And what people might notice is that, oops, and I have little trouble with my mouse. I'll bring you back on screen. That is not that far away. And I think time-wise, we're also in the same time zone because it's my place. It's 12 minutes after 5 o'clock. And what
Mm-hmm.
time is it on your side? It's the same, I guess.
It is the same, yes.
It's the same. So I'm always asking this because I think it's interesting for people to notice a little bit. And of course, if you're from a different part of the world, you might not always know where the time zones begin and end. And even there, I'm sometimes confused myself with some of the I've noticed that with some of the ways that we schedule things, that I'm sometimes confused also. But welcome. Well, for the people, Jay, that don't know you, could you give a small introduction? Who are you?
Whew, I feel like that is a big question. But I will start with I'm a lot of things. So currently I'm working as an agile coach.
Mhm.
Um, I also do personal development coaching. So that's one-on-one coaching, like pure coaching that's not agile related. Um, I am a South African, so born and raised in South Africa. I recently moved to Berlin, um,
Mhm.
and recently, as in 6 months ago, so still quite new. Um, what else? Um, I don't know. I'm a
And what made you
very
move to Berlin? What made you move to Berlin? If you want to share, of
um,
course. Huh?
yeah, I'm happy to share. So it's actually a topic that I think is relevant. So for the most part, agile coaching is not super prevalent in South Africa anymore, or at least in Cape Town where I lived. So career prospects for the future, it's not that big anymore, for
Mhm.
lots of different reasons. And so I was also working for a company based in Germany, remote for the last almost 3 years. And I just decided to move over and see what it's like and live in another country. And why not?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful experience to do that. I've moved for about a year to the south of France with my family to live in Bordeaux. Um, and yeah, I think it's a wonderful experience to do that, to learn from a different country, culture. I think Belgium, France is not that much a big difference because you're not just moving countries, but also continents. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
a, a little bit different there. But still, it's an interesting experience, or probably even more interesting experience to do this. So thanks for sharing. I think it's also well part of what I want to see when we do this series, to learn a little more about people and then learn a little bit what is possible. There's actually quite a few people here who have been moved from one country to another and have been shared their stories, and you're, well, I would say, in the middle of it, because if you just moved
Mm-hmm.
6 months, it's almost like yesterday. Um, So actually, the way I think about it, because 6 months ago, that's like what? Uh, it's very short, I would say. So let's jump right into that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Hmm, that's another big question. And I'll answer it honestly, actually. So,
That's nice.
well, what I mean is, I won't give a superficial answer.
Mm,
I think the thing that influenced me most that a lot of people don't know is that actually my upbringing in South Africa was not very privileged. So
mm,
I grew up for most of my upbringing up until I went to university. We were considered quite poor, I think, by South African standards. Um, and even if I just think about high school, um, if I think about my class that left school, like only about 20 of us, maybe 30 out of 200, actually made like sustainable careers afterwards. So in
wow.
that sense, yeah, so in that sense, it's like if I see how far I've come, that's actually quite amazing. And I think why I say that influenced me quite a lot is because as I grow and develop my career, move across the world, I think I'm more conscious of my privilege that I have now than I guess making us, than I guess it being a default thing. So something that I take, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Something that I take for granted. I think I'm more aware of that.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I can definitely see that you're yeah you didn't have the privilege, but you at that moment when you were growing up, and now you realized a little bit that privilege or part of the extra privilege that you got. I think it's and yeah, me as a white man or an older white man, I would say I probably have a lot more privilege, and it's only by making really attention to that, like what is this? What are these things? Um, I also felt like we weren't rich when I was growing up, but definitely we also were not poor. We were able to go. I think most years, maybe not every year, but most years we were able to go on holiday, which is already something that many people cannot even do.
Mm.
I remember later in my life when my father talked to me that he actually never went on holiday with his parents because of the well, first of all, because it was just after the war when he was growing up, so that's already a different situation. But even there, with being a rather large family, and I only realized that I think when I was only in my 30s or something like that, not realizing how that was completely a different kind of world than how he grew up.
Mm.
And I really like that you state that. Okay, and well, maybe let's turn it into a question. How much were you aware of that lack of privilege when you were young? Did you realize it at that time?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I did and I didn't. So I think there was some awareness of it because, especially when you're at school, you notice it the most. Like other kids get the fun new toys and you kind of like, oh,
Hmm.
don't. I mean, that's a small example, but it's just something that comes to mind. Mm, but I think the older I get, the more aware I became about just how different that was. But I wouldn't say it was like the biggest focus of my life back then. So it's kind of
You
like a
didn't
mix.
feel blocked by it. Is that a right way to put it? Or you kind of felt like, oh, they have nice new tools, but it didn't define you as a person at that moment? Is that how I should see it?
Mm. I would say I didn't feel blocked by it because I just assumed I could do whatever I wanted. Um,
So
like
I assume that's a big um thank you to your parents in a way that they kind of raised you as not feeling blocked by it. Because I can imagine that many people sometimes raise it, yes, well, you have to be, we can't do it because we're poor, and that's, you always will be like that, or something like that. It can block people, but that doesn't sound like you were raised that way. Maybe I'm exaggerating now. Huh? I'm
No,
kind of.
no. I think you're right. So I think my parents did play a part in shaping this possibility mindset, I guess.
Mm.
Um, both my parents were big readers. Um, so
So
I've
there were lots of books in the house when you grew up?
tons of books, a lot. Um, so that was always just a natural part of my life. So me thinking I was going to university was never a question. It was just something I assumed I would do. Um, and also,
That's already just that idea growing up, that it's kind of course I will go to university. And it doesn't
yeah,
mean that if you don't go, you're failed, because you might have gone into a different direction, but just having that option of by default you will go is probably also a kind of privilege that other people might not even have for that.
yeah.
So that's very nice of giving that opportunity. I want to zoom in a little bit on something you said earlier, because you said from your high school, like only 20 kids moved on and
Mhm.
having other kinds out of the, if I'm correctly, 200. But you also said that there were other kids that had more privilege, like other tools, other play
Mm,
stuff,
mm,
and
mm, mm,
stuff
mm,
like that.
mm.
Is there a correlation between these 20 that did have a lot more, or is there no? Or
Mm, I think it really depends. I think it depended on the person. So
mm,
I think some people had they just always knew what they were gonna become. And I think they pursued that no matter what. I think irrespective of their upbringing. Um, and for others, I think like many people, they just also accidentally like landed into good places. So I think it just depends.
mhm. I'm asking because it also shows a little bit that, or it could show that it doesn't really depend. Well, there is a big part of the privilege that many people don't realize, but you are an example where you lacked some of that privilege. You had something else, like for example, the books, the ideas that you could go on is already also a kind of privilege that we don't always see. But it shows that the privilege is, for me, is, yeah, it's a very, there's many grades, I would say, of scales or whatever. It's not
Hmm.
just you're privileged or not privileged. You have many different. In Dutch there is a book which I'm trying to come up with. I think it's seven things, and so seven things that we could have. But actually, and I'm trying to see if it's visible. I'm not sure where. Somewhere, where am I pointing to? There, I think, yeah, it doesn't matter. There's a book that's called Better Allies, and
Hmm.
that one has a list of, like, I think more than 50 different kind of privileges. And it was really interesting for me to read it, because when I started reading it, I realized, oh, and now I see that actually this is the book. Oh, there's a law.
I
I can't
love
really.
your bookshelf.
It's it's 50 things, and I when I read it originally, I was really like, whoa, okay, that's a privilege, okay, that's also privilege. And it's like, and I realized that, yeah, being a white European old man, I have lots of these, probably more than many people, and there were still other things that I didn't have. And it was really interesting for me to think about all of these kind of things. Like, I guess nobody has 50, and some of us have like more than half of it, and others have maybe just a couple. Um, and it also made me think about how could I indeed be a better ally? How could I work? But also, how could I, how would I say, also have much more respect, and realize that people say, hey, look, it's not because you're lacking some stuff that you can't do it, and how could I help you? Um, we've been diving immediately into a very deep topic, I would say. So I now understand why you started the way you started about saying being very open and yeah, that's a very deep topic to go into. So thanks for
Hmm.
sharing that. It's yeah, it's how I like to start. So I'm really happy that we can work that way. Let's move to that second question. If you had not been doing what you'd be doing now, do you have any idea what could have become of you? Was there something that you were destined to become?
I don't know if it's something I was destined to become, but maybe two things. So, actually, before I went into tech, I was working in the film industry with as a production assistant, as an editor. I really liked doing those kinds of things, but I don't know if that's like my life passion. But I
Hmm.
think I probably would have done something where I was working with my hands. So I find like I really love doing stuff with my hands, building things, which is probably why I got super obsessed with Lego for a long time.
Hmm.
Like putting things together and seeing it grow and develop. I love that. In agile coaching, it's kind of hard because you don't always see the tangible results of your work immediately. It's quite a delayed
Hmm.
gratification.
Yeah, these pesky people that when we work with you give them some idea and it takes them ages to understand or us to understand them might be even more important. Um, I fully understand that, and there is also something, yeah, like you say, very tangible by putting Legos together and putting a lot of that is a lot of interesting things that are going on. So thanks for sharing that. That yeah, I really like where you put it. Like you said, okay, that was the other industry. Is there? Could you share a little bit about what made you move from one to the other, if that's okay to share?
Sure. Well, now this is kind of related to my first answer.
Or okay.
Um, so I think at the time I was working as an intern, and then I kind of got my first job, and it's a lot. Well, in South Africa at least, I don't know how it is globally, but it's a lot of long hours for very little pay.
Hmm.
And at one point, I was kind of paying to go to work, which was not sustainable. Um, Paying
Not in the
because
law, except if you're very rich, but otherwise, and
exactly,
that was also part of your first answer. You didn't start that way, so no.
exactly. So while it was a lot of fun and I enjoyed it, financially it wasn't like sustainable for me long term. Um, and then I just decided to shift gears into something else. Um, yeah, that's pretty much why.
But and it's a very very important reason to do that. I mean, it's interesting. I've sometimes heard people say, "Yeah, but it's bad when people go into IT for money." I'm just like, well, no, not particularly. There is a reason why. Well, people need to have money, and their life or lives needs to be sustainable one way or another. And it doesn't mean that when people start that way that they don't have any passion and that they don't have anything there. So I think you're a nice example of someone who's been very passionate about, and we'll talk more about that later, I would think. But yeah, it's not because yeah, and it doesn't tell, and it's very nice the way you say that you liked it and anything, the previous job. But of course, if you spend money to go work there, it's not sustainable, and then you need to find a
No.
different solution. And there will become a moment that it's not even enjoyable anymore because you know that okay, if I work longer, I actually lose money and whatever. So yeah, of course, it makes people move in a different kind of direction. And I guess at the same time, you learned a lot that is still valuable in whatever you're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like the other day, I was editing a video for something, so it's not like those skills have left me. And I think also what taught me. what I learned a lot in working in that industry was also being able to like receive feedback or being able to like um, work in a team, because when you're editing something, at least if you're not famous and you're editing something, you have to be able to work with someone else and get feedback, make changes, adapt. Editing process is also very agile, I think. I mean, you don't sit there and do something from start to finish, you do it in iteration. So I think it taught me quite a lot. And I also didn't like immediately just step into IT, like for the money aspect. I studied something first, actually, um,
Mm.
and then I did like this conversion program, and then I fell into Agile completely by accident as well. So,
As many of us sometimes do, because it's yeah, I think that's uh, a recurring theme in this podcast. And people say, well, I discovered agile, or was I fell into that. And and sometimes people say I can't escape anymore because I like it so much, or whatever. There's multiple versions of that. And yeah, so I think your story is different and the same at the same time. I would
mm,
think it's like everyone's story is very particular, but there are of course things that all of us we stumble into things. And I like always to stress that, because I have at this moment children that are, well, the oldest is 21 and an 18-year-old, and a 15-year-old, but the oldest two are studying in university and stuff like that. And they're thinking like, we have to decide now, and then the rest of our life will be defined by that one first choice. I'm like, maybe not. I mean, I've seen many people who've moved careers, who've moved many different things. I think if you look back at my parents, yes, in their life that was
mm,
like one or two careers, and that was it, and mostly very very similar. But I think these days people try out many more things and move much more, well, basically in an agile way, and learn a little bit. This works, so this works maybe a little better, and then stumble up
mm.
to multiple things, I would say.
Yeah. I think it's very hard to know when you're young what is the thing that you're passionate about, the thing that's going to make you earn a good enough income for you to sustain yourself. All those different parameters have to meet. But I can't remember what that Japanese diagram is that talks about that. Um,
The Ikahi thing, is that?
yes, yes, the
Yeah,
Ikigai diagram.
Ikigai, that's the thing. Yeah, sorry, I was, but that's indeed I really thank you for bringing that up, because it is so important. And like the sentence you just said before, what 18-year-old or 20-year-old, I mean, I'm more than 15-year-old, and I still don't know what I want to do later. I mean, I just kind of moved, well, out of coaching to become an engineering manager just a month ago, because I really want to go back in and working with a team or a department and doing some stuff with everything I've learned. I have no idea if I will how long I will keep doing it. It might
Mm,
be that I will that's a new career. It might be that in a couple of years I say, let me move back to coaching. And at this point, that's not really important for me. It's like, okay, I really like this kind of company. I know I can bring in a lot of value for the people there, and that's the kind of thing. And I think what you stated in that, how many people know it when they're young, what they were going to do, that's exactly that kind of statement. That's
mm.
so. Thanks for bringing that up, because it is an important thing, and I think many people, if you're now 15-year-old or 40-year-old or 55 years old, you still need to hear that it's not what you did until now that it means you can have to do this for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and like you said earlier as well, like skills that you learn in whatever job you do, somehow they they support you in your future careers, whether you realize it or not. It's just sometimes it's less obvious.
That thanks for adding that little extra because that's indeed very important to see that. I want to move to that next question. What do you consider your biggest challenge and why is that a good thing for you? And of course, the biggest challenge that you want to share open on the internet.
What is my biggest challenge? Um, I think I think this is actually still a big challenge for me is listening to my own voice and gut feel. Um,
Mm,
so for the most part, I do it well, but there are times where I think where I still get stuck. Like I will see either a LinkedIn post or a video, and someone presents an idea, and then I go, ooh, should I like change my whole life? Like, am I doing things wrong? And I'll like contemplate this. Um, so I think it's a good thing in many ways because I'm constantly questioning like my own beliefs. But I think in some ways, um, I think I also need to grow a bit more in like just being like these are my beliefs and that's okay and that's fine and just accept that.
it's and I think it's a hard challenge for many of us to at some time. I think you phrase it really well. Like there is something coming on our path, and it makes you think like, is this now my new path? Should I move in that direction, or wait a minute, what's the course here? And I think that balance, finding to okay, do I let myself inspired by something else and I move in a certain direction, or do I keep my steady pace on a certain thing? And yeah, that what's that balance? I think it's something that I think it's both rewarding and challenging at the same time. It
Yeah.
is. And when you say so that second part of that question, it's not just the big challenge, but what is a good thing about that for you? Could you say some more about that?
Mm, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that I'm aware that this is an area that I need to like develop. Um,
Mm,
but I think it's a good thing because I think information is always going to come at me, and I think people in general. There are so many voices on the internet, and I think it's good to be influenced and inspired by people, but I think it's good to also learn for yourself. What do you believe to be true? Um, and I feel like in ways why I say it's a good thing is because the fact that I'm wrestling with this means that it's front of mind, means that it's an area that I need to grow, meaning I'm guessing I will improve. Well, that's at least how I see it. If it's something I'm aware of, something I feel like I need to work on, I'll only improve as a person.
But that I like that as a state of mind, as like you say, it's there. You think about it. You challenge yourself. Um, do you have people around you that help you with that? I mean, like a coach or a partner. I don't know, someone that helps you in finding that, or do you do that all on your own?
I try not to stay in my own brain, so I have lovely wisdom people that I
Mm.
connect
I
with.
like how you
So
pronounce that. Lovely wisdom people.
so, my husband is a good wisdom person, just because he is the complete opposite of me. So I know that I'm always going to get a very different perspective. Um, the next person I nominated for this um, series, Joanne Peddle, she is also my wisdom person. Um, she has a good way of asking first whether I would like to be asked a coaching question or do I want advice, and then she'll deliver whatever I ask for.
Wow, that's a very powerful way of starting an interaction. If you say something to actually, okay, what do you want from me? That's very powerful way of stating it. So that's already a good thing. We'll probably talk more about her later on in the show.
Yeah.
But it's good to hear that indeed, and this is I kind of suspected that. That's why I dare to ask the question. Uh, but it's yeah, I think it's also again important for people to realize that even when we have balances, and even the way you state it, it looked like okay, I can do that all by myself, that you actually have people that help you out with that, because that's also a little bit for me what we see, or what I see in the world, is that many of us, we do have, I also have been for more than 20 years, I've used many different kind of coaches, not always the same, and depending on what kind of topic, I might actually go to different kind of people. But it's so important, and I would not be where I am without all these people over all
Mm.
these years. And luckily for you, you have a partner where you can also do that. It's I like also my partner and me. We also have very different ideas on many different things. For us, it's at the same time challenging, and also yeah, that brings so much. Well, I would say joy in my life, but at the same time, it's also challenging because sometimes my partner at least says sometimes like, "Why can't you just be happy?" It's like, no, it's not about not being happy. It's just again like, hey, how could we learn from each other? So that's at least how it feels to me. I'm not sure if I'm now projecting something in you, but when you say we think different, that's also a little bit what I'm recognizing.
Mm. Yeah, I think I mean we align obviously on some things and we think differently for other things, but
Luckily.
but I think that's even true in like a team space. Like when you have diversity of thought, it's so good, even when you go through the pain. It's so good because you get different perspectives, you get different people looking at something from a different perspective. Um, Different opinions, and that can help you sometimes to see things that you might not have seen if you were just on your own or if you were someone
Mm.
like minded. So,
Yeah, I like that, how you put it that way. Okay, I want to move to the part where I alluded already a little bit to, is that what drives you? Because you're, like I said earlier on, I think you're a very driven, a very passionate person. And I want to go a little bit. Do you know where that drive or that passion is coming from?
oh, I think what drives me in a career sense is just I'm laughing at myself because I think what drives me in my career is a pursuit of knowledge.
Hmm.
Is wanting to improve and be better in my role. But then I also had this awareness recently that I'm not ever gonna know all the things. Um, and
You're
even
not.
just there's
Oh, now I'm disappointed.
I know, me too. And and also just like I'm never gonna read all the books in the world, which is another thing that stresses me out completely. Um,
Mm,
So I have this awareness, but I think what drives me is just wanting to learn more, or be excited by things I learn, or try stuff.
that's interesting. And it's interesting that you, when I asked the question, that you kind of limit it to work. Is that very different to personal life? And again, it's up to you what
Hmm.
you want to share. But when I ask what drives you or what is your passion, uh, not many people make that distinction. So you made it almost instantly. So I wonder, is there much difference?
Hmm. I think it's because, and maybe more so recently, I don't feel the need to be driven in my personal life. Um, so, for example, the way I approach going to the gym at the moment, like I'm just going to move my body. Whereas before, I was like, oh, I need to lift the heaviest weights and do all the things and or whatever. But now I'm just trying to like enjoy the pace of life. Go move my body, go travel, not necessarily to see all the things in a location, but just to experience a different culture. Um, So I
I
wouldn't
like that because
decide being, yeah.
you make, if I understand it, you do want to learn and grow as a person work wise. But for, like you say, the gym, I really love the examples. Like, I want to keep doing it, but I'm not setting really tough goals. You're not planning to go to the Olympics or whatever. It's like just the normal kind of thing. As yeah, like, okay, probably that means that whatever weight lifting you do already now, you want to keep doing that, and a kind of keep in shape way. And but not so much with larger goals. Where I what I hear as well is that when you were younger or earlier in your life, there was a lot of that.
Yeah, because I think I just got burnt out of trying to achieve in every area of my life. And
Hmm.
I think that kind of got compounded during COVID. So, for example, during lockdown in South Africa, we had quite a harsh lockdown where we weren't allowed to go outside even to take a walk. We had to basically be in our houses like all the
Full
time.
time.
And during that period, like I
And
lost.
you had to just, again, you share what you want to share, but was it a large house? Where did you have lots of room to, for example, avoid your partner? Because let's face it, sometimes that was needed in that period.
No, my husband and I lived in quite a small apartment, a nice apartment, but it was tiny. So we were both working from home in a room smaller than I am now. Um, we were working there, we were playing video games there, we were hanging our laundry there. So, um, but during
So
this
it was
period,
really tiny, and I can imagine at that moment, especially if you're locked in, that it really felt even more claustrophobic. That's why a little bit why I asked the question. Is that
yeah.
a true way of feeling what that it was for you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was very like small, it was confined. And so my point was that we also weren't allowed to exercise outside. And we lived in
Mm.
such a small apartment that like trying to exercise, we bought weights and all those things, but trying to do it was almost impossible. So I kind of lost a lot of my fitness in that period because we had quite a long lockdown, and I came back to gym and I was just like so frustrated because I wasn't where I was. And that like caused me to go to gym less because I was judging myself about not being where I used to be, and it was a whole thing. So I kind of just decided to go back to gym and do what I can and not try and be whatever I was, because I think that comparison game was just rough. Um, and so, yeah, so to answer your initial question, I try
But
not
wait,
to achieve.
before you go, I want I want to stress out a little part, because
Mm,
you were talking about this and saying, okay, I was not where I was before. I was pushing, and you were not happy about yourself. And I see many people around us doing the same thing. But we just survived COVID in a very hard way, and people are still. Like, I've seen many people who crashed in the beginning. In the beginning of COVID, when they
mm,
had to be confined, it's like very hard. And I see a lot of other people that kind of struggled along and survived, and now they're struggling afterwards, and like they're pushing on themselves, and oh, I didn't do well and whatever, and they
mm,
and or they're kind of because they were in survival mode, and now they're crashing. But many of us, I actually, if I look for myself, I really had to realize, look, what we've done these 3 years was hard for in whatever way. And I was lucky because I had a large house and a garden, and everything that was needed, so I didn't need to go outside much because I had everything.
mm,
But still, it was a lot different than for many people. And it kind of feels that you were very hard on yourself for reasons where I feel like you should not. It's kind of normal to feel, to be out of shape and to be whatever, because how else would you have done it? Is that, am I now stretching in another
no,
way, or no?
no. That's actually a common comment that I get, that I'm very hard on myself. But I think that was true then. And oh, now we're coming back to like observing the voices of other people, you know?
Mm.
It's like so much during COVID was people learning to bake sourdough bread and learning other languages and all these lots of things. And I feel like um, I feel like all I was doing was speaking at conferences, and I say all in the context of how I thought back then. Um, and in a way, I felt like, oh, I wasn't really looking after like all facets of my life. But if I look back now, I have this awareness like COVID wasn't easy. I legally wasn't allowed to go outside. It's not like I had the space. So I've come to a forgiveness space for it now. It's just that back then, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself, and that is why um, I talk about achieving in terms of career now and not so much personal life because no, I'm just here to enjoy life, however that looks.
Which is also a big achievement in itself. And I think we'll talk more about the remote part and everything. But I think you also had, of course, a lot of opportunity during COVID because you had a bigger experience about remote work, a lot more than many other people before COVID. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there was, of course, a lot of career opportunities for you at that moment because, yeah, you had that experience that many others totally didn't have, and so it was also kind of natural to jump into these career opportunities at that moment, I would say. And I think it's also, this is again, then we're coming into the whole topic of work-life balance. What does it mean? Well, for me, there's balance doesn't mean you're always balancing one way. It's balance means we kind of try to integrate as much as possible, and sometimes that balance will go in one direction and the other
Hmm.
part will move in another kind of direction. If it would be constant balance, that probably would be, for me, it would be boring also. So that's another part of it. um, but thanks for sharing. And I interrupted you at some point. You wanted to say some more. You want to still go into that?
Oh no, I was just saying, I think I said it already. I was just going to say basically to answer your question about where am I achieving and why. That was what the story was about.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for still adding that. I think, yeah, it's we moved in multiple kind of directions with that question, but it shows also so many different kind of aspects of who you are, and we talked a lot about, well, the whole COVID situation. Thanks for sharing it, how hard it was in South Africa, because I think for many people don't always realize what it is in different kind of countries. It's interesting, we all had the same disease, but all countries reacted in a different way and had different kind of rules. In a sense, I think, well, your your con I'm trying to say not even country, but your whole continent had much more experience with epidemics than the rest of the world, I would say, because you had to have, and so they were more looking into that. And but it's interesting to see how different countries behave in different kind of ways, and probably will take another, I don't know, 20-30 years before we have all the data and realize what
Mm.
was now a good strategy. In a way, there's I think for scientists, this is a very playground with lots of data that is interesting to look at. I'm not sure if we all have if the data is really that public and if we can actually look into that, but the whole situation, being the whole world having the same problem and the way it reacted, might give us very interesting data in the future. Well, only the future will tell us if that's true or not. Let's move to that next question. What do you consider for yourself your biggest achievement so far?
Ooh. Ooh, I don't know. Um,
Well, let's before we go into that question, let's go be to the question behind the question. How easy is it for you, Jay, to brag? Because basically, this is a
it's
moment
not.
that you can brag.
It's not easy for me to brag at all. I feel very uncomfortable doing it. So maybe I think
But you're allowed. Everybody is here waiting to hear it and tell you, please, Jay, don't take that opportunity.
so. I feel like I can't decide because
Hmm.
the thing that I should say is my biggest achievement. My biggest achievement was co-authoring our book, the book I wrote with Kirsten Clasey. And
Mhm.
by many ways, it was one of my biggest achievements in life. I mean, I never in my lifetime thought that I would ever be a co-author of a book. Um,
Mhm.
but I actually think like the biggest achievement for me was we built a little community around remote facilitation during COVID. We don't do it anymore, but I think that that was a lot of fun. We had a lot of cool people join, and I really
And
liked that.
just for because you kind of mention it, but you don't mention it. The book is called The Remote Facilitators Pocket Guide, if I'm correct.
It is.
Uh, so, well, because you kind of talk about it, but you don't mention the book, so you can take the moment fully and really talk about that book that you co-authors. And if I'm correct, it was actually translated in multiple languages. Is that correct?
As far as I know, Korean and Hungarian. I'm not sure if there are other translations out there.
But still, it means it's not just you wrote the book, but other people, because I assume you don't know Korean and you don't know Hungarian. So
No.
it means that other people found it so well, so good that they said, hey, this is actually so valuable. I'll spend my time and translating it. Is that
hmm
correct?
Yeah, so publishers in both of those countries picked up the book and then decided to translate it and publish it in those countries. So yeah.
So, so it means I'm stressing it because it means it's not just, oh, I wrote a book, but it's really a book that was valuable. And like you said, during COVID, it was really an important thing to for many people to realize that. And that is indeed something that you can be proud of. It's interesting that well, when I started out as, is it easy for you to brag? It's not easy. And at the same time, when the hard part was choosing. So I heard there was another thing. So let's hear it. What's the other part?
Well, I guess related, we built this little community where we were sharing remote facilitation skills with people across the globe, and we'd have like these regular meetups where we'd share and other people would share their stuff, and we'd created this little learning experience, and I think that was quite nice. Um, so working with Kirsten has been one of my favorite adventures for sure. I think we've done a lot of magic together. Um, so yeah, it's kind of a mix actually because I
So
feel
it's
like
not
it's
just the book; it's the whole community around it, and so there is a lot more. That's what I'm hearing.
yeah, I think so. And maybe back to your point, if I should be more confident about my achievements, is the book was kind of a big deal because we got published by an American publisher. Um,
Mhm.
and I even remember as Kirsten and I were writing the proposal for the book before COVID was even a thing, we were like, oh my gosh, who's even going to read this? And we were thinking, can we even write a book? But we did it. We wrote the book actually remote. And
So you were practicing what you were preaching.
we were. I mean, we were using all the techniques that we spoke about in the book, and we submitted our book 3 weeks before deadline, which was unheard of apparently.
So let's bring that. I think yeah. It's of course kind of a joke. I put it, but at the same time, it's not a joke because I do think, like you said, it's sometimes hard to brag, and I think it's important for people to realize that. And what I especially like is how open you are about, because sometimes people see, oh, this is a person and they wrote a book and that's like so they have their whole life together, and the way you say is like, yes, I achieved that, and at the same time, like, can I really brag about it? Is this yeah, it still is hard. And
Mm,
I think for many people, just realizing that it's not because people wrote a book that it doesn't mean that there are no other things, and yeah, that sometimes are still challenges and there are still things that so I think it's really valuable when you share all of
mm.
that thing. So thanks for doing that. I want to move to that next question about personal agility tip. Do you have a tip to share with the rest of the world?
Um, my personal tip is this is gonna be so cheesy, but it's for sure responding to change. Um,
Mm.
I feel like, I mean, even just the process I went through with moving countries, I feel like you can make the best plans in the world about your life, and then something will change and you'll have to adapt. Um, and I feel like that is very true for just life in general. It's makes sense.
I, I I like that. It sounds so easy the way you say it, but it's so profound. Responding to change over following a plan, which is the typical thing that we say in the from the agile the manifesto. But it's so tempting for many things of us. It's like, okay, there is a change, and let's face it, even for many agilists, even if we believe that the very first thing that there is a change in our life, even if we choose it ourselves, sometimes it's still like, "Ugh, okay,"
Mm,
because it doesn't mean that it's always nice, that it always feels good. Sometimes it feels hard, even if we know it's better. And yeah, responding to the change and looking at it and seeing, and well, like you said earlier on, about somebody posts something on LinkedIn, and it's like, oh, is it the direction I can go? Do I want to do it or not? The responding doesn't mean I automatically have to do it. No, it's thinking
yeah.
about it and realizing, is this for me or is this not for me? And it's the response, the think, the okay, what does that actually mean? Something happens, and making what I would say a conscious decision.
Mm,
That is what I'm hearing. It's interesting that you call it cheesy, because I think I understand why you say it, and at the same time, I think this is so profound. So yeah, it is so hard for. Well, I'm going to just talk for myself. I know just for myself that responding to change is not always easy. So how easy is it for you as a person, Jay?
whew, it depends. I feel that even that is like it's a coaching answer. Um, no, so
So it depends on what. On what does it depend?
so you kind of alluded to it, right? You get change that happens to you, you get change that you choose. Um, so it really depends on my frame of mind. It depends on what the change is. It depends on how much it impacts me. So, for example, a change that happened to me that was really hard to deal with was I moved into a lovely new apartment, and on the same day I got laid off. And that was like
Wow.
two changes in one. That was just like, wow, exactly. It was like, wow, that is a lot. Um, whereas whereas responding to change could be something like, I chose to move to Germany. I made that decision to move, and it felt like, I did so much research. I had all my plans in place. I was ready for the change, and still, like, it's a massive thing to happen to you in your life. Um, and it has quite a big impact in many different ways. So,
So,
um,
did I understand correctly that on your very first day that you were in Berlin, you had to look for a new job as well?
Well, well,
Or
well, I've been
again,
laid off two times in my life. So
wow,
actually,
okay.
the first time was moving into a new apartment in in South Africa. I with Germany, it was the next day, the day after I moved here. So
Oh, but that's a lot better. That's just the next day.
so it's like,
uh,
these things happen. Like, so what I'm trying to say is like change is gonna happen whether you ask for it or not.
mhm.
Um, and learning, maybe this is something Joanne says, I feel, is learning how to dance with things is super good. Being flexible with how you respond. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard. It's going to be hard. But it's also about like figuring out how to, I guess, manage your mindset and your response to it.
And it's interesting because when you talk about music, dancing to the music, is that if you go out dancing, you don't choose the music. It's someone else who's choosing the music. So there, you
Ooh.
still need to adapt as well. So yeah, there is something there. I think as well is that when you go dancing, you might you say, okay, there's a good song. I go onto the dance floor, and just while you arrive on the dance floor, the DJ puts on a new song, and they're like, okay, what do I do? Well, I moved here. Let's try to make it work for a song or two, whatever. That's the image I got when you talked about that. I'm not sure if it's completely correct, but that was my fantasy there.
Yeah. No, that's a good analogy. I like it.
Well, I want to move to in this conversation to one of the things I'm looking most forward to, of course, to you is what have you learned about remote working? And you wrote a very good book that, like we talked about. So, is there any tip that you want to share? And of course, part of the tip is I will link to your book that you wrote so that people can find it. But is there anything particular, maybe after that you maybe something that you said I would have wanted to add it to the book now, or is there anything else?
I don't know if it's anything new, but I will say that remote work is hard. It's easy and it's hard at the same time. Like, it's provided us with so many amazing benefits, in terms of being able to work from home or work from anywhere. It's opened up so many doors for so many people with childcare, with doing chores at home, with being able, whatever, so many different reasons, that it's been wonderful and amazing. And at the same time, it's hard, and you have to be more intentional when you work remote. So something that Kirsten and I always talk about is, we first met in an office, and the way we became friends and colleagues was like we both loved the same shoes, and we wore the same shoes, and we were like, oh, like, oh, we love white sneakers, and then we became like besties because of that. And that's a little bit harder in a remote space because you don't have what we call accidental connection. Maybe in some ways, like if you have a good background and you see a book, you strike up a conversation like that. But I mean, if you're like me and you just moved and there's nothing behind you, what is there to tell about my
Mhm.
story? Um, so I think the thing I've learned is that remote work is hard. I know that a lot of companies are moving towards hybrid. That's even harder than remote work because you have to deal with people that are
Oh yeah.
co-located and people that are remote, and it's a little bit more messy. Um, so I think the biggest thing I've learned is that you have to be a lot more intentional. You have to plan a lot more. You have to be purposeful in how you do things.
That's I think so many things in just a couple of minutes. Like indeed, you occasionally said, okay, hybrid is even harder. That thank you for that. I think that's a whole different kind of ball game.
Mm,
And I would even say at this moment, well, I would say we're at hybrid where we were 10, 15 years ago about remote. At that moment, people said remote doesn't work. These days, I think we know remote is possible. It's not easy. It's hard. You need to do, like you say, very intentional. But we know we can make it work. We can work on that. hybrid, I think we're at the level that many people say it's not possible, let's not do it. But the reality is also that this is part of our life in a way. So I think we still need to discover a lot more about hybrid work. How do you feel about that? When I say that we still need to work on that and discover that. Do you
Mm.
agree?
Yeah, so the thing that came to mind is like early in remote work, I don't want to say I was anti-hybrid, but I knew that it would be more difficult than remote work. But also, what I've learned through listening to my colleagues and things is some people really crave going into the office. Like they love it and they want to be there and they want to socialize and they want to connect with others. Other people are hardcore. I want to work from my own space. Like, please don't bring me to the office. There are some people who don't mind floating between either. So you have so many different needs and wants when it comes to how to work that I feel like the conversation around hybrid becomes more important. So like, um, because on the one hand you can't cater to everybody, but on the other hand, if you can accommodate everybody, like why not try? So what that looks like in a perfect world, I'm not sure. Still figuring that out.
Yeah, and I think, well, it then it goes back to your previous answer about responding to change, because yeah, there's a lot of things. I really like that you stressed out the three different kind of personalities, that people who really want to go to the office, the others say no, I want to at home. What you said earlier on, it depends a little bit also about your family situation, if you have ill
Mm,
kids or if you have, I don't know, other kind of things that you want to deal with. All these kind of options were not there when we go to the office. I think I see or I hear a lot of people talking about more inclusion and diversity with remote work. That you say, okay, we can bring into people into work that were not able to do that for
yeah.
all kinds of reasons. Um, and then there are the people that, yeah, that have the option, that will try it. Let's do it a little bit once in a while. At this moment, for example, I'm going 2 days a week into the office, but most of my colleagues these days are in Ukraine, in Lviv, so that's not even possible to visit them for obvious
Mm,
reasons, I
mm,
would
mm.
say. And most of them can't leave the country for another, again, the same obvious reasons. So that means that we have to deal with a lot of that in different kind of ways. So yeah, thanks for bringing all these kind of different things into that, and talking about the intentional part, because that's, I think, what I'm hearing and that I see in a lot of things. If it's remote, if it's hybrid, let's think again. And I hear the same thing, like what you said about resisting to change. It's yeah, finding how do we deal with change and how do we work with change. It's again something similar. Like, can we be intentional about what's happening and what we want to move? So that's
Mm, mm.
very interesting part. I want to, oops, and I have something strange here going on. Let me fix that before I want to move on. I want to move to that next question about what's a book that you have read that you want to talk about? And if I remember correctly, you had a few books that you wanted to talk about.
You see, I have a problem. It's too many. um,
Well, I don't have that problem. You can see that on my background. There's lots of different books. And the part of my problem these days is with all the recording, I learn every week about another book that is really interesting, and I don't have time to read it. But
oh my
still,
gosh.
I want to learn much more. So tell me about what's the first book that you want to
Mm.
talk about.
Well, the most recent non-fiction book I read was The Good Enough Job, Reclaiming
And I think that's
something.
the book,
Yes,
right? The Good Enough Job,
yes, that is the book.
Simon Stolzow.
Um, so
Why should
as
I read it, or
someone,
why should people here read it?
well, I'll tell you why. Well, I don't know, maybe if it's your cup of tea, but what I liked about the book was that it wasn't trying to give you an answer. So oftentimes nonfiction books tell you like lead you down a path of like this is the author's
Hmm.
conclusion. In this book, the author just tells different stories from different people's perspectives around how they view work and how work fits into their life.
Mm.
And it was really good for me because it helped me to think about my own relationship to work. Um, so when I think about the first job that I got laid off from, for example, I was overworking. I was doing too many things, and then I got laid off, and I was like, oh, what is all that like high performance about? Like what did I even do? Um, and similarly, the second time I got laid off, I was a high performer as part of my career feedback form. Was working a lot, doing a lot of things, and then I got laid off anyway. So I think it was a good reflection for me to think about like how much I was investing in my work. And I think this book is nice because it doesn't tell you like, oh, stop caring about work and just do nothing. Go open a bar on the beach, which I've thought about a few times. Um, it actually
So
just like
talking about different career options, there is still more that you think.
it actually just lets you like reflect on like what do you think about work? What role does it play? I was someone that had like Slack email from work open on my phone all the time, which is not super healthy personally. Um, and it just helped me reflect on that. And so now I feel like I love finding meaning in my work. I love loving what I do, but it also doesn't have to be everything. Um, you know.
I like that you point out these different kind of things, and it's interesting to indeed think about. And what I well, you said, is that something that might interest you as for a reader? Yeah, having a book with talking about multiple people and multiple, that's for me, when I read a book, for example, when I read about remote working, I read multiple books because I wanted to see and learn from
Mm.
different kind of people. And this kind of book feels a little bit similar, like, okay, there's multiple people that talk about their facets, and this is what I like to get inspired. So I'm afraid that's yet another book on my list to read. But I like it in the sense that with just reading one book, I learn about different kind of people. So that's also something that I like. And talking about different kind of things, let's bring the next book. What's another book you want to talk about?
Well, my fiction book. If you love sci-fi, I would recommend Project Hail Mary.
Hmm.
Same author that wrote The Martian. Um, it's just a beautifully written sci-fi book, and I feel like so often for myself, I feel like I need to read nonfiction, because I have to learn, I have to absorb. Um, but it's just a wonderful book. It's a wonderful story. And if you ever like stuff about space and life out there, and you want a good story with good dialogue, highly recommend Project Hail Mary.
Thanks for bringing. And at this moment, because of a lot of time, I read a lot less fiction. Also, part because when I was, what is it, 13, 14, I read one fiction book a day, which was completely unhealthy, because that was like, yeah, I literally sometimes read until 3, 4 at night, and then I
I
had to get
did
up
the
at 6 or
same.
7. It's very unhealthy, but in a sense, I read at that moment like, yeah, 600 books in 2 years, and yeah, I was kind of fed up with fiction at that moment. I it's a little bit like from time to time, I don't know, when it's holiday, I pick up a book and then I read it again in 1 or 2 days. But these days, I'm less interested in starting again, depending a little bit, because when my children started to learn to read, I read Harry Potter with them, for example, and
Mm.
then I quickly read all of them. So something similar. And I think, if I remember correctly, you still had another book which is kind of a little bit between fiction and with nonfiction. Not sure if you know which one I'm alluding to.
The Jerry Weinberg book.
No,
Or
there
which
was another
one?
book I think you talked about. um, which was a biography, if I'm correct, if I understand correctly.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, I forgot. I was so lost in my thoughts. You see, there's too many books on my brain. Um, so one of my favorite biographies is Arnold Schwarzenegger's Total Recall. Uh,
That's the book I think you're
that
talking
is
about,
the
right?
book. You are correct. I have too many books on my brain. That book.
And just
um,
by coincidence, last night they aired one of the Terminal movies on Belgium television that I watched, and like I thought, yeah, I know the movie, and but like yeah, it was there, and I was like, okay, it's on, and I keep watching because, and it was only when I was preparing today for the this that I realized, hey, wait a minute, that's very coincidental. I watched the movie yesterday and today you talk about. So tell me, why is it such a good biography to read?
oh, I love that biography. Um, I think because maybe it's because in his biography, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you can just see how he grows as a human being over time. So when he talks about his youth and what it took to get him to grow as a person, he speaks very openly about how arrogant he was, what a silly young man he was, like how he was just like all over himself and his ego was part of it. And as he tells the story of him getting older, you can see actually how his mindset shifts, how he starts to care about the world around him, how he starts to think about like developing youth in America, for example. It's just amazing to see how someone is able to openly speak about like how they've changed. And I think a lot of people don't like to acknowledge, how awkward or uncomfortable they were as they were growing up, or how they might have
Mm.
been like problematic or challenging. And also, I know that he also has a lot of saucy moments in his lifetime where he was not acting as 100% of an angel. Um, but I feel like that's also us as human beings. Like we're messy and we're complicated and we're not always perfect. And I think he speaks so
No,
openly
you're
about.
not. You're not.
No. Um,
But thanks for bringing that up because it's indeed, and again, this is so important for many people to see it, and the fact that you bring it up by someone who was well world famous as an actor and also governor, and because yeah, politicians they should be the show the good example. We have lots of examples these days
mm,
that are not doing well, but at the same time he's not afraid to share his vulnerabilities and to all of that, where
mm,
some of the other politicians that I'm not going to mention, they want to say, "Oh, I'm such a good person," whatever, and actually hiding all their vulnerabilities and all their problems. Where he is kind of doing the opposite and saying, "Look, I made some things in my life that were maybe were not that smart. I was a young person. I've grown up. I've learned from that, and that's so nice." So it's interesting. So it's very nice. It's this is the kind of well, that's why I say it's fiction and non-fiction because there's sometimes always a little bit romancing in
yeah,
this
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
biographies, but at the same time, it's learning a lot about the struggles that people had in their life. So thanks for bringing that book. That so in that way we quickly talked about three different kind of books, which is I understand not much, but at the same time also a lot. So thanks for taking that time. Um, and I want to move to that next question. What is a question that you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer then?
Um, hmm. What do I like to do for fun, I guess?
Hmm. Thank you. I like that kind of question because it shifts us to all kind of different things, and I think that's also important part of a life of a person. So, Jay, tell us, what do you like to do for fun?
Okay, well, please I love to build Lego, as I've mentioned before. Um,
Hmm.
so if you send me any new sets that are coming out, be sure that I will probably buy it and spend too much money. Um, like that's the problem. Um, and also
I'm
like
sure that your husband will never hear this video. I will make it.
no, he also encouraged me, so he bought me lots of my Lego sets that I owned. I had over 30.
Wow.
Um,
And did you at some point also use it professionally? Because a lot of coaches are using Lego in a professional way. Did you do that as well, or do you want to keep the fun and the work parts of that out of each other? Or?
no, I ran a retrospective with it once, which was really cool. Very early in my career, but I think as I started working with semi-remote hybrid teams, it became more challenging. So, um, not often, but people, yeah, I bring it in now and then. Um, yeah, so that's what I like doing for fun, besides reading tons of random things.
We don't well, and it kind of shows a little bit multiple kind of things. You already talked, and it brings it a little bit full circle because you talked
Mm,
already a bit about Lego, about reading. But I like just the fact, like I said earlier on, that you want to bring that other part of you in your life about because I think it's also important. And yes, we can be serious. Yes, we can do lots of stuff. But if we don't have fun in our life, what's the point of all of this? I would
mm,
say. I think that that is also an important part to sometimes think about that. And just like you said earlier, in I think it's even the very first question or in the very first questions, just doing things with your hands, it can bring a different kind of way of thinking. It can make us move and do stuff. I think that is also an important part of many people. I would say that difference is not just purely the thinking, but let or and like the people from Lego Serious Play would say that let our hands do the thinking, and we learn by I've seen it actually. I learned it from another German person, Olaf Lewitz, that actually facilitated my very first Lego Serious Play, where we were building stuff and then afterwards ask, okay, why did you build that? And then all of a sudden you hear yourself or your neighbors say
mm,
something very profound about something that I had no idea what my hands were doing. And it looked like, oh, this is nice and cool. And then you have to explain it. And then you hear yourself explaining it in a way like, oh, really? What was that what I was doing? And I think that kind of links a lot of the things that sometimes what we're doing with Lego is just fun, but sometimes it's also our hands are telling us something. I think
mm.
there is part there as well. I want to move to that last question. Who do you think I should ask next? And you kind of alluded already a little bit about some of the people that we're going to talk about. But there's multiple people. Again, just like with the books, I think you wanted to talk about multiple people, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I mean, oh, so I think a lot of people have already been on your Who is Agile actually, because I love so many people in the Agile space. Um,
Well, I
but
have at this moment I have 500 people on my list, and I've only recorded hundreds. So I think there is still a lot of space, and I would even say some of the names that you came up with are on my list,
mm,
but have
mm,
not been invited yet. So I'm really looking forward to finally have the opportunity to invite some of these. So let's bring it on. Who do
yeah.
you want to talk
So
about first?
so definitely, I know my co-authors on your list, Kirsten Placey. So we worked together for a super long time. Um,
And if I'm not mistaken, that's her. Is this correct?
yes, yes, that is her.
It's always dangerous because
Wonderful.
we didn't check the pictures up front, and so it's always interesting. But I was kind of sure with Kirsten. So tell me a little bit. Why should I invite
I think because Kirsten, she's just marvelous. I think not to give too much away, but I've always found her approach to agility to be like from a superhuman perspective, like
Mm,
not in any way. What's the word I'm looking for? Not like not like stuck in like a particular format or a particular formula or
mm.
particular methodology. She just genuinely approaches agility with this humanness and this like perspective of like bringing people together and making sure that they're just cohesive. And I feel like she also brings a lot of fun into work. So um yeah, I can't say enough magical things about Kirsten. So
Well, I
definitely on
let
the
her do
list.
the talking in the next conversation. So,
Hmm.
but you had, I think, at least, if I remember correctly, at least two other persons that you were thinking about. Who were you
Um,
thinking about next?
Joanne Perold is my next
And
nominee.
that's her, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
This one I was pretty sure because we met before as well. So tell me, why is Joanne such a good idea to be on the show?
because Joanne is like my wisdom box, agile person, everything. So I've told the
Wow.
story before, but actually, so very early in my career, I did a Scrum Master certification training because I was trying to figure out more about what it meant to be a Scrum Master. And in that course, Joe was training the training for the first time, and that's how I first came across her. Um,
So you were one of her first students. That's what I'm hearing, right?
I was, and in that training
And
course, yeah.
she still convinced you, even it was the very first training. That's also very good, I would say.
Well, yes, like from that training, I became obsessed, and I was like, I'm definitely becoming a Scrum Master because I wasn't before.
Hmm.
Um, and at that training, she brought Lego to the course, and I was like, oh my gosh, she loves Lego. I love Lego. I love her.
So checkbox already good.
Yeah. And then I didn't like after that course. I mean, we didn't like stay in touch. She was a trainer. I was a student, and I'd gone to a few of her talks at Scrum conferences. And I remember she keynoted one conference. And I will let her tell the story because I love it. But she keynoted this one talk that was kind of controversial. Um, but even that, I was like, yes, like her thinking is so different and it's so vibrant and I love it. And I don't even know what happened that we became back in touch, but we became back in touch in COVID with remote facilitation. And now she's like a very good friend. I speak to her once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, and I was like, oh my gosh, if you had asked me back in 2014 or 2013, would Joe Peddle ever be like my wisdom person? I'd have been like in my dreams, and now she's there. So yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up and bringing that whole story because it shows also um, I would say also the impact that people can have. I think, well, this is why I asked also a little more about deeper about being the first trainer. So, because let's face it, every time that people, when we create courses and when we're a trainer, we become better after a while. So it's not that the very first moment we're immediately good, but that's the best version. I'm pretty sure that Joanne, what she does is a lot better these days than what she did then. But it was already so good that it convinced you in bringing that version, and I think that is also important to state. And I think that's and like you say, well, over the years, it's almost 10 years if I'm hearing it, 2013,
Hmm.
2014. So that's a long period of connection. and like you say, maybe we got a little bit out of touch, but then we run into each other again, and becoming much more friends and being connected all the time. So that's a very nice story of bringing that. And I know you had, or if I remember correctly, you had one last person that you wanted to bring.
I did, but she asked me not to mention her, so I will keep her name
Okay,
private.
then we'll won't talk about it. Thanks for checking. It's also important. It's interesting because it's not because people mention it that people immediately say yes. I think from
Mm,
the 500 people, I think there's already 20 people who literally said no. I don't want to come on the show. Some have been invited, some have not been invited. Or that I contacted, or that like a little bit like what you say. And I think it's also important. It's not because we like someone that that person automatically has to accept that this is happening. And so it's nice when people check it up front. But yeah, sometimes I even edited out some other invitation at some point.
mm,
So
yeah.
that is also possible. And it's I think it's important. It might be that you feel like, okay, this is important, but if that person feels, okay, I don't feel comfortable, that is fine as well. I think I really like when people kind of protect their own boundaries.
Mm,
With
mm,
some of the people that rejected, I'm like, oh damn it, and sometimes I understand it because sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm retired, I no longer want to do it. Sometimes
yeah.
it feels a little bit silly, sometimes it's other kind of things, but it's really not important what I feel about it. It's really
Mm,
important that the people put their own boundaries at something that is for them important, whatever that means. It could be that maybe it's the wrong moment in their life, and that's fine as well.
mm,
Actually, and some of the recordings so far, there was actually one recording where somebody after the recording said, I actually talked very openly about some stuff I'm not even sure I wanted to be published. And so I give this person the time to think about it. In the end, that person decided like, okay, I'm actually looking back, I feel very comfortable, or no, it felt okay, by the way, that it was a discussion and a conversation, so I feel comfortable about it. But it was, yeah, I think it's important to give people the time. It's not because we recorded this here and now that I have to publish it. It stays, and I think it's important
mm,
that people realize that it stays, there's, well, I would say the responsibility, but it stays the choice of the person that I'm interviewing with, if they feel comfortable about having
mm,
these kind of things. I think this is also part of what for me is important in this community. Um, and I think I've said it many times off camera after recordings as well. It's like, maybe you feel uncomfortable about a certain part. That's okay. I can send you the recording and we can make a decision later on if you want me to take something out. And with that,
mm.
I think it's a nice way to end the conversation. Jay, if people want to, or Jay Allen, if people want to contact you, what could be a good way to talk to you or to reach
Mm,
out to you?
good question. I am always on LinkedIn, so you can just search my name.
That should
Um,
be the link, if I'm correct.
that is
It's
the
probably
link.
not sure if you know the exact numbers because it's a little bit a complicated one,
I don't know why.
but it should be the one.
Yeah, and on there I have like my website address, my email address, so I'm easy peasy in terms of communication. I respond to everything.
Wow. That puts a lot of pressure, I would say, depending. Of course, this is not a video that will be watched a few million times, so I think it will still stay okay. But thanks for your time. We talked a little bit before. I think we try to say let's keep it to 1 hour 20 minutes. It's around that time, I think. So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it's been a wonderful conversation. We went into all kinds of directions, and that's how I prefer it most. It's like it's unpredictable. But it's how I feel that. Yeah, it really feels very natural conversation, just like we would be sitting at the bar at the conference and talking a bit. It's been scripted with some questions, but other than that, I think we moved in all kind of directions. So I'm so
Mm.
happy with the time you spent with me tonight. So thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for being such a wonderful host and for having me. I think you also held the space really nicely. So I did read the questions before the time, but I also felt like I wanted to be, present in the moment. So that was good.
And I like it. It's and yeah, there are some people that have scripted it out. Most people then leave the script once we started talking. But like you say, it feels really these are natural kind of conversations, and yeah, that's how. Well, I hope people that watch this, and you could put it in the comments, but I hope people like it as much as I did. It's really been wonderful. And yeah, it's wonderful to hear about the whole move you did. I was aware about the book even before, I think, because I think we've been in contact, or at least I was already a little bit in contact with your community just before COVID. But it was wonderful to see everything growing, the whole reactions you got about the book. And like
Mm.
I said, I think you really should be proud about that book with everything that you did there. So thank you very much for having this time here, and I'm pretty sure we'll keep in touch and maybe run into each other at the conference somewhere later.
Yeah, I hope so. That would be lovely. But thank you so much for having me as well.
Bye bye.
Thank you for
Bye.
watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.